I won't lie, my vote went to Shane Long, firmly and strongly. But there we are, Kieran Kelly.
That's fine, John. It's all right to be wrong.
Yeah. Tomorrow's semi-final, we'll see Sean Maguire's goal for Cork City in 2016 go up against Johnny Walters' 2 goals against Bosnia. What chance does Johnny Walters' international goals have against League of Ireland? None. There's going to be a League of Ireland final come Friday.
One would hope.
Ronan Mullen, Off the Bull podcast has been accompanying The Last Dance. The Last Dance has come to its glorious conclusion. Episodes 9 and 10 this week. I think it's fair to say, first and foremost, Steve Kerr emerges as the rightful hero of this series, especially in episode 9. 5 NBA championships as a player. So the three-peat with the Bulls. Not much is made of the fact that he goes and wins another 2 with the Spurs. And obviously we know what he's doing with Golden State, where he has 3 in his back pocket as a coach. That's 8 in total. And episode 9 detailed the death of his father, Malcolm. He was killed in Beirut. He was the head of a university there. Seemed like a very impressive man. Both Steve Kerr's parents are professors, which is not overly shocking news. And he talked about the loss of his father. He came through in a big way towards the end of his Bulls career. He was given the clutch moment by Michael Jordan and he made a count. He shot the three-pointer. Or maybe it wasn't a three-pointer actually, but it was a little bit out. But he did his thing. He came through. Steve Kerr comes across an incredibly likeable person. He did anyway, but I think will be one of the lasting legacies of The Last Dance.
Yeah, there have been a few hidden MVPs, but he's certainly one of them throughout the series, and he kind of made that known from the start. I felt from week 1 almost that he was the yin to the yang of some of the other characters, that he was quite level-headed. And Paxton made the same point, and Steve Kerr makes it himself, that he had to accept the place of a role player quite early in his career. And I was making the point on the podcast that in some ways being a role player and coming in for these clutch moments, like your role is almost amplified because you get 3 or 4 shots a game, and if you miss them, you know, the whole world is watching. Whereas if you're on the court for the entirety or for the majority, you get the chance to rectify those errors. So I always find that interesting with Steve Kerr. And as you said, his, you know, how brilliant he is as a coach leaves little to the imagination, in the sense that he played under Phil Jackson alongside Michael Jordan. Then with a 2-step, he was playing under Greg Popovich and alongside Tim Duncan. So you don't get better schooling than that. But the story about his father and his grounding as a, I don't want to say a social activist, but he's certainly no stranger to speaking out on socially prevalent issues. And that's kind of clarified and, again, sort of illuminated in this series. So, yeah, he was unbelievable. And that was probably that 10-minute stretch. It was the highlight of this week. And just trying to remember the last 10 episodes, broadly speaking, it's right up there in terms of my highlights, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to ask you about Jerry Krause. I wasn't sure if Jerry Krause, one way or another, would get some right of reply in this series. He passed away in 2017, so clearly it couldn't happen in terms of modern recording. But if there was, there must be footage somewhere where he gives a bit more detail or a bit of explanation for his thinking, because the way this wraps up, for people who haven't seen it, and I'm highly recommend it obviously, but the way it wraps up certainly is that 1998 has happened. It's the second three-peat. The Bulls have won the championship, and all the main players, Jackson the coach, Jordan, Scottie Pippen, they say there's a question mark over, but they figured they could have talked him around if all the others were staying. But Jackson would have stayed, Jordan would have stayed, let's say Pippen would have been convinced, Kerr would have stayed, Rodman would have stayed. The implication is they all would have stayed for one more year to defend what they had won. And Jordan feels he was playing as well as ever. He had more craft than ever. And the documentary, and you can never shake the fact that Jordan has okayed this whole documentary, this whole enterprise. The documentary, it cuts to shots of Krause looking particularly short and malevolent and at the celebration of the 98 championship. And it really does present him as this egomaniac who can't hack the fact that he's in the shadows of Jordan and Phil Jackson. And so he just wants to tear this whole thing up. How has that been received? Because he does strike me as he can't have been this awful.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack in it, really. Like the whole thing that before Jerry Krause and before Michael Jordan, it's not as if they came in and sort of revitalised this dormant volcano. This was a nothing franchise before those two arrived. So Michael Jordan deserves enormous credit, and I always just think the Krause making the point that this is an organisational success never sat well with anybody really, let alone Jordan. You have to give Michael Jordan the bulk of the credit and those on the court. To suggest that Jerry Krause is the puppet master, masterminding this incredible dynasty was a nonsense, really. And then, like, it's borne out in the fact that by 1999, they made reference to the fact that the Jazz shot an all-time low score in those NBA finals, but the 99 Bulls broke that record. So what Jerry Krause did with this famous rebuild never really bore any fruit. But the practicalities of it, in his defence, I don't think it was really feasible that that team could have stayed together. He didn't help himself with the Phil Jackson comment. There was no walking that back saying, if you go 82-0, it doesn't matter, you're gone. That was crazy. With possibly the greatest coach of all time, to put those strictures on him made absolutely no sense. But Scottie Pippen, whose body was notably breaking down in that final episode, as they chronicled in 1998, he needed to get paid somewhere, and the Bulls were never going to give him the money he needed. Dennis Rodman was missing in action as things stood anyway. Michael Jordan, for all you said, that he definitely was playing with a lot more craft, but he played over 4,000 minutes that season, and he is human as much as he tries to portray it to the contrary. You know, he was starting to age a little bit, and I'm not sure whether things would have come in 1999 with the Spurs being what they are, with Duncan emerging and Popovich, and also the fact that they were going into a lockout season in 1999, so it would have been a lot more of a sprint than a marathon. You know, you would have had hit the ground running, and you saw even in 1998 with Pippen going into that season with an injury that they were slow to get going and ultimately peaked at the right time. But I just think the writing was on the wall for that team anyway, and I think there's a lot more luster around them. This unknowing that they might have done it in 1999, but I think it's almost better that we don't know, because it just leaves that mystique. And I thought it was interesting that it almost went unsaid for the last 22 years, but Michael Jordan saying it was maddening that he never got the chance to go for 7. I thought that was interesting, that it's still something that irks him to this day, you know.
Yeah, that was the finishing thrust from him. He was really angry. He still almost hasn't dealt with it. Whereas Phil Jackson obviously went on to great things and had an excellent second part to his coaching career. He's more in keeping what you're saying. Look, we had a good run, team was coming to an end. Maybe it's not the end of the world that it ended when it did. But Jordan is at the end of this saying, like, I almost can't deal with the fact that we didn't get to defend our title. I'm really mad at it. It's maddening.
Yeah, and Phil Jackson, I think it was almost a blessing in disguise that he probably wouldn't have had that success with the Lakers and rocked up with Kobe and Shaquille O'Neal to build another dynasty in Los Angeles. You know, it kind of worked out pretty well for him. And without that little rest, he might never have A, gotten the chance, or B, been revitalised enough to take on another mammoth task like that. So yeah. I just think, in terms of the production, I don't know what you thought of the final episode, but it's so interesting. I think it's interesting anyway that Jason Hare has been working on this for 4 years, and we spoke before that the footage has been around for 22 years, and it took so long to get greenlit that because of the pandemic being that it is, this was rushed forward, and this has been his magnum opus. This has been the thing he's been working his whole career towards, and then he's told a few weeks' notice, oh, by the way, would you mind wrapping up those concluding episodes quickly? And they've been conducting it. Apparently last Thursday, they put the finishing touches to episodes 9 and 10 via Zoom. Right. So I just think if it felt a little bit rushed, that probably justifies it. But all things considered, and the strictures that Jordan's company presumably put on him in terms of what he could delve into deeply, I think he did a very good job with it.
Yeah, agreed. Richie, let us know when you watched it, because I'll happily talk to anyone about it for quite some time.
Tell you what I've been watching, Joe. I've been watching The Last Ride, the documentation of The Undertaker's last couple of years in the WWE. Equally as fascinating, if not more so. And I'll tell you why. Because Jordan's is 10 episodes of great player is great, might be a little bit of an asshole, we'll move on. Mm-hmm. Whereas Undertaker is an old man whose body is breaking down and keeps making a hames of attempts to solidify his legacy. Far more entertaining, Joseph. Far more entertaining.
Okay. The Last Ride.
The Last Ride.
You will enjoy Dennis Rodman's cameo appearance at WrestleMania or one of the wrestling things in the mix.
He was WCW.
He was in WCW in '98 for a bunch of appearances. Yeah, and he used to. There was a documentary made about that recently too, where he used to traipse off during the middle of like playoff practices just to rock up in episodes of Thunder of a Thursday night, and just because, and they'd be ringing him going, "Where are you?" And he's like, "Well, I'm at the wrestling in the ring."
Yeah. So somebody says, Joe, I love the irony of Richie slating you for years as a golf snob and is now a full-blown League of Ireland snob, says Colm. I know, I agree.
Right, well, on that, you see, I just like League of Ireland football, whereas snobbery is inherent within golf. So there's a slight difference there, Joe.
Sorry if you've already covered this, but did you hear what Grant said today about the series? 90% of it is bullshit, he says. It was made by Jordan's company. Krause has come out as the baddie, which is an easy route to go down when he's no longer with us, as Neil and Bray. Neil, that was pretty much exactly what we were saying. That I don't feel, and maybe it's part of the... I didn't realise it was so rushed at the end, Ronan, that he was told, you need to get this ready because we're in a COVID crisis. But maybe Krause is one of the victims of that, in that there's no footage of him explaining his take or his sense of things, and that's a tricky one to handle. We got to move on. Sorry, we really got to move on. So Newsround, we have news from Munster. Sad news for Tyler Blindell. He'd been trying for some time to turn this around, Richie.
Yeah, unfortunately not to be for the out half. He's been forced to retire from rugby at the age of just 29. He's been advised to quit due to a neck injury sustained back in November. The former New Zealand under-20 international joined Munster from Crusaders in 2015, going on to play 62 times for the province. Munster head coach Johan van Graan has been among those who's backed Blindell to make a successful transition into coaching. We
mentioned the positive test in the Premier League yesterday. We have the identity of one of the players anyway.
Watford defender Adrian Mariappa has revealed he is one of those who's tested positive for coronavirus. He's one of 3 people at the club who failed the first batch of Premier League tests. Speaking to the Telegraph, Mariappa says he doesn't know how he got COVID-19 and will now follow protocols before going back to training. A number of players at Watford, including captain Troy Deeney, haven't returned to training over coronavirus fears, and their manager Nigel Pearson has given those players his full support.
I think one of the key factors in this is there are still a few unanswered questions, and wherever there is an element of doubt, and if players feel that there are too many question marks, then we respect their decision. Having said that, the players that have come in, I know because they've spoken about it, I've enjoyed today. I've made my position very, very clear in terms of what I think about the overall situation. But having said all of that, my job still is to very much support the people I work alongside.
We'll touch on it in the football show, but it was interesting reading Adrian Mariappa's comments about COVID. He was in complete shock. He tested positive. He was completely asymptomatic. He was feeling absolutely fine. He said that he had been spending virtually all his time at home, mentioned his wife had gone to the supermarket a few times, 1 or 2 food deliveries, maybe that's how he got it, but was totally shocked. No symptoms whatsoever, and would never even dreamt of getting himself tested if it hadn't been for the fact he's a Premier League footballer. And in a way I thought, well, that is encouraging news almost, because I think the Bournemouth assistant coach said the same thing. Burnley, sorry, excuse me.
Ian Wallen.
Yeah, so maybe in a month or 2 when we start doing zero prevalence tests to see to what extent we might have herd immunity, hopefully there are lots of Adrian Mariappas all over the world and in this country, and more of us have been through it than even realise. So that was quite interesting based on his interview. We'll touch on that on the football show. Jurgen Klopp talking as well.
Yeah, he's speaking to Sky. He's echoed Pearson's sentiment, saying he's given free rein to the players whether or not to return. The Premier League champions-elect resumed at Melwood today with no confirmed absentees. Klopp's been discussing how best to get a squad who's been off for 9 weeks back to match sharpness.
You know that from pre-seasons that managers usually say we don't know exactly where we stand in this moment, so we need maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 games for to know more about our situation. Now the challenge is we all have to be ready for the first game, so whenever it will be. And that's interesting. How I said, our game is for different reasons always different. So it means you never have the same game again. And you never have the same situation again because everything is perfect for a second. Then you have injured players, so you have to adapt to that and all that stuff. And now it's a situation we don't know. All of us don't know when we will start. In the moment, the earlier they can tell us, the better it is, of course. But we will not say, if we don't know that, we cannot do this or that. For all the teams, it's the same. And that makes a competition. If all the teams have the same circumstances, then you have a proper competition. And that's exactly what we prepare for without knowing when it will start.
Now, there is lots of competition to see who has had the worst COVID campaign of all the Premier League footballers. We had Jack Grealish had a bad start, it's fair to say. Kyle Walker then took on the mantle in a big way. But on the inside lane, romping home as the clear winner is Serge Aurier. This is quite something.
It's not even a competition of this, Joe. Tottenham defender Serge Aurier has defended his decision to get a haircut while in lockdown. The right back responded to criticism of his Instagram post showing him getting a trim by writing blah, 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 followed by several snoozing emojis. It's the 3rd time that Aurier has broken lockdown rules, having previously posted videos of himself running with a friend and then training with teammate Moussa Sissoko. Spurs say they are investigating.
The 3rd time? Does he even know there is a lockdown? Like, are we absolutely sure he knows? This is great.
He posted it up on the follow up to that story. There's a blah 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 snoozing emojis one was saying his barber had been tested negative apparently for coronavirus. How he knows this, I'm not too sure. Saying he's negative as well. Everything's grand. I just wanted a haircut. And to see there's pictures from Melwood doing the rounds this evening of Sadio Mane, who's let's say his hairline is about as favourable as mine is, growing out the back, and it's looking a bit bushy. And Roberto Firmino's turned up looking like one half of Hall & Oates. Everybody's turning up to training a bit scruffy, but Serge Aurier, he wants to keep in trim, he wants to look good, and he's going to get fined for it.
But of all the players in the Premier League that would be disposed to breaking rules or not being able to stay within the margins, Serge Aurier is up there, judging by his playing ability, because the man is just the most error-prone fullback in recent times. Anyway, I don't know of years of yore, but Jesus, every time I watch him, he's an accident waiting to happen. So.
Yeah. Well,
tactically naive.
Caught for the first time, he went out in his Spurs training gear and ran around in the park. That was a bad idea.
In fairness, his manager did that.
Caught for the second time.
Mourinho went out the first time in the tracksuit.
Caught for the second time, posts a video of himself. He outs himself. He's not caught the second time. He puts a video up, and now third time he's put a video up of himself again getting a haircut. So that is the hat trick for Serge Aurier. Take the Tadhg Kennelly route. That is the.
When was the last time you recorded yourself getting a haircut, Joe?
Yet to be done. I might actually do it the first time it happens now.
Document it live on Instagram.
Yeah. So, news on Tadhg Kennelly at Sydney Swans.
Yeah, sad news this. Tadhg Kennelly's future at the Sydney Swans in major doubt this evening. The All-Ireland winner with Kerry is among those not reinstated by the AFL side following Aussie Rules coronavirus hiatus. Every club is confined to a staff headcount of 25, and Kennelly finds himself at the moment surplus to requirements as midfield coach. He is a Swans Hall of Famer and is said to be devastated by their decision.
St. Teresa's your next story.
Yeah, boxing in the country is in a bit of a crisis moment at the moment, because St. Teresa's in Bray is the latest boxing club to find itself homeless during the COVID-19 pandemic. The premises they'd occupied was sold from underneath them, they say, by their landlord, and without warning, they claim. They have been offered the use of Rath News space, but that's 29 kilometres away. St. Teresa's is home to the recently retired European bronze medalist Regan Buckley. Tullow Boxing Club announced yesterday that their landlord refused to freeze rent after they were forced to close their doors in March. And no boxing will be allowed in the country, as we know, until August 10th at the very, very earliest.
Okay, it's not great. Wish them well. Hopefully they can turn the situation around. Doesn't seem great though. Where are we going next?
To France after 9 days. Racing that resumed in France. Courses in Paris and in the east of the country have been closed. The government have stopped racing at Longchamp, Saint Cloud and Auteuil because the areas fell within virus hotspots. Racing in Ireland is due to resume behind closed doors on June the 8th. The executive of France Gallup has said that the decision to close those tracks is both irrational and doesn't make much sense, claims he.
Somebody's texted in to say, lads, was vaguely aware of the Jordan phenomenon when it was happening. How could you not be a fan? But watching the documentary, the person, present and past, has just left me a bit cold. No real redeeming qualities. Discuss. Ronan? Yeah,
I'm intrigued by the amount of people quote tweeting that clip from last week and saying, oh, this speaks to me so much. Does it really? Do you know many people who behave like that in the workplace? It's bizarre. I think there's a very small sliver of people talented enough to justify the way he carried himself. But I think that is ultimately it, that people were willing to put up with it. And I'm sure there were bits edited. Horace Grant made the point that they didn't show the Bulls barking back at him. People didn't take this stuff lying down necessarily, but I think when push came to shove, they knew what he could deliver on the court, and that's why he got away with it. But I don't know what to make of him. He obviously, as we've said in previous weeks, he thought that people would have a dim review of him because of this. But I'm not so sure. I just think such was his talent, and I think it's been justified in the sense that what he's won in his career, that I kind of fall down on that side. But I can totally see the point of view, as that texter said, that you can come away from him as a person quite cold, you know.
I would share that opinion, really. I didn't warm to him overly. I don't mind the way he conducted himself as a player. I totally get that when you're in that space, you're not always the most rounded person, and he was clearly the alpha male, clearly the driving force behind the team, and clearly felt the best approach was to be on people's cases. May have overstepped the line. You can forgive anyone that. The modern day Jordan, I don't find all that interesting. You know, he's been compared to Roy Keane a lot, but Roy Keane is all, for all the kind of mad things Roy might say, he does have these many redeeming qualities, like incredibly funny and charming when he wants to be. I don't quite feel that came across over the course of the 10 episodes from modern day Jordan sitting there in his mansion talking about the past. Now, I never felt, ooh, this guy is fascinating or a really deep thinker or really funny. I didn't find much to latch onto.
Yeah, you'd wonder about his contentment, just the fact that he's still harbouring these kinds of grudges. And the Charles Barkley one, which is more of a fresh one, Jordan's obviously, because of his managerial stuff with the Charlotte Hornets, and Charles Barkley is an analyst on basketball these days, and he criticised Jordan's GM style, said he was the worst GM in the world or something to that effect. And these lads were friends. It was almost as if Barkley, people will know he's not afraid to fire shots, but it was somewhat tongue-in-cheek, and they've had no relationship ever since. Jordan's just burned that bridge. And there's a very cool clip of the two of them on Oprah where they're kind of trading barbs in a friendly manner. It kind of displays how friendly these two people were, and now they have no relationship whatsoever. So it just shows that Jordan, that side of Michael Jordan wasn't limited to the basketball court. He carried that obviously into business, where he's flourished as well, to be fair. But it's not as if the modern day Jordan and the one that we've been watching for the last few weeks aren't that dissimilar.
Yeah. Look, I guess if any of us were held up to that kind of scrutiny, is the other thing. Rich, do you want to give us a last story?
Yeah, Bayern Munich goalkeeper Manuel Neuer has extended his contract there until 2023. His current deal is to run until 2021. And Athletic Bilbao striker Aritz Adjariz has announced his retirement at the grand old age of 39. He scored 141 goals in 296 games for Bilbao, following spells at Mallorca and Valencia. He's the oldest player to ever score for Spain and was part of their Euro 2016 squad. His swan song was to be April's Copa del Rey final with fellow Basque Real Sociedad, but instead he's going to have to retire and go off and have a hip injury. Or hip surgery, I should say.
Okay. Richie McCormack, thank you. Ronan Mullen, thank you. Cheers, fellas.
Nice one.
Cheers, Joe.
So again, the plan this evening, Daniel Taylor will talk to us about the Bradford City fire. 35 years on, there's been troubling information of late in the last couple of years, so Dan Taylor will reveal all. After 8 o'clock, Geordie Murphy will talk to us about life up in Ulster. And up next, Lawrence Donegan's going to talk some golf with us.
Golf sensation Tiger Woods says his car crash outside his Florida mansion is a private matter, and he intends to keep it that way.
Every one of you has good reason to be critical of me. I want to say to each of you, simply and directly, I am deeply sorry for my irresponsible and selfish behavior I engaged in.
Oh, yep. He's hurt. There is something wrong right now. Something is wrong with Tiger Woods. Grimacing after his tee shot at 9. Barely able to pick up his tee.
My second shot, I fell back into the bunker. Just jarred it, and it's been spasming ever since.
Same spot, same location as before?
It's just a whole lower back.
Listen, the Achilles, the knee, fine.
Sure.
But golf, and you got a back problem?
Yeah.
Oh, everything's about twisting and turning. He is finished.
At the 2017 Masters Champions dinner, Tiger's and told a couple of the guys at the dinner that he was done. So if Tiger thought he was done in 2017, the rest of us all had the right to think he was done.
I'm incredibly impressed with his comeback. In his current form, he's a great player. Again, he has a game that is good enough to win majors, will win majors. And I really don't think it's one. I think he will win a few majors as long as he stays healthy, yeah.
Board, please. Tiger Woods now driving.
Oh, yes. Tiger Woods now one back.
He knows all about this green, and this is going to get better and better and better. He hasn't forgotten how to do it.
Vintage Tiger Woods has showed up this afternoon on the back nine at Augusta. How about this?
Very good. Tiger on the charge. That was a noise and a half.
Many doubted we'd ever see it. But here it is. The return to glory.
22 years on from the first green jacket comes the 5th.
Your son